Welcome to the Galactic Core Podcast. Here to review the latest films and TV shows from all your favorite intergalactic universes. Now, it's time to get your geek on. Please welcome your host, the prophesized chosen one. It's Andy.
Hello and welcome back everyone to the Galactic Core Podcast. We are back as always to be chatting about the next TV episode, and we've got a big one this week. It is the finale of Loki Season 2, Episode 6. It's been an epic series, I think, and we've got a lot to discuss. I've literally stopped watching it about half an hour or so ago, so it's all a massive jumble in my head, and I'm so excited to be able to talk about it. And as always, and as I always try and do, and as I always promise to do, I've got some fantastic guests on this week to be able to chat with me and discuss everything about this series of Loki in the finale. They have a fantastic podcast themselves. They're always in high demand to speak to, and they've always got some really great opinions. So I'm really, really pleased to the show to welcome from Two Black Nerds, it's Jordan and Des.
Hello.
Hey.
Super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super happy to have you guys on, to be fair. You know, I'm really honoured that you come on. How you guys doing? How's your week been?
It's been good. It's been a busy week, I think, as we, probably all are experiencing with this and the Marvels and obviously other things outside of it, Gen V, Invincible. There's just a lot to get to. And now the strikes being over, I mean, it feels like we are turning a corner back to what feels like normal days, to where we can just kind of enjoy the stuff. So I know we've been busy, but it's been a really fun time.
Absolutely. You guys got to see the Marvels last night, correct?
Yeah.
We did. I'm literally going to watch it in about 2 hours' time. So I'm super. Just spoiler-free review. What are you guys saying about it?
Des, you want to go first? I'm still trying to process, what I'm thinking about the movie.
Yeah,
honestly.
in a very basic level. I actually had a great time watching it. It's not a perfect movie, but to be honest, the fun watching it was enough for me. I know a lot of those a little less quote unquote good MCU films I don't even have a good time watching sometimes. But this one, I was just like, that's fun. I like that they did that they had fun with it, and that's what mattered to me here.
Yeah, I think for me too, there was a lot of conversation coming into the movie about the low expectations and obviously just the general discourse around Marvel. And honestly, going into the movie, like, my expectations have been lowered, but mostly because of the first movie, Captain Marvel, which I'm not really a huge fan of. And this one is definitely better, if you ask me. I think that it's a more fun adventure. There's much better chemistry. The story does move quickly. I think my biggest problem with it is that there's not much of a plot really in the film. But at a certain point, I just kind of let that go and, try to enjoy it as much as possible. So there's some good stuff to like about it. All of the comedy doesn't necessarily land for me, but there are some good things. It's not this train wreck that I think the narrative out there is making it out to be, So I think that there's some really good stuff to take away from the movie.
Nice. I'm actually really excited to go and see it tonight, and my review will be out next week of that particular film. But guys, chat to me about, I guess, your nerd credentials is the way that I always like to phrase it. Talk to me about the MCU. What else outside of the MCU do you love? What draws you into these kind of films and these kind of franchises? Jordan, start us off. What is it that you love about these kind of things in the MCU?
I mean, it's a couple of things. I've always been attached to this type of material and this media since I was a young kid. I think, a lot of us growing up, we grew up either around comics or video games or animated series that were on. But, at that particular time in that era, me for, being sort of a 90s kid growing up in that era, it was not the dominant force in pop culture. It was there, it was present, and you could find other people who were into it, but it wasn't like this thing that everybody engaged with. And that was always there. And I grew up a massive Batman fan. That's my favorite hero. And all of a sudden in 2008, the pendulum completely swings because you get The Dark Knight and Iron Man in the same summer, which are two probably the most pivotal movies, at least for franchise cinema of the 21st century. Yeah. And that's where everything changed, where now everybody's a fan. And so it was validating to have that and to, sort of experience that, to know like, oh, I've always been there. I've been day one, but also it's cool to see like other people, start to gravitate towards this. And I think once all of these other franchises, these other comic book properties, these other cinematic universes start to pop up to varying degrees of success, there's a lot to enjoy, there's a lot to critique as well. But it all goes back to that love that started at a very young age, just being engaged with that stuff, across various mediums.
Des, what about you? What's your relationship with comic book movies and stuff like?
Man, not too dissimilar. Man, growing up, I just watched a ton of TV, man. I mean, you name it, Power Rangers, things on Cartoon Network, Saturday morning cartoons. I mean, as a kid, you have action figures. If you remember when Yu-Gi-Oh first comes out, cards are all over the place, Pokemon. It was just so much around pop culture, man, and it was so easy, I think, to attach to superheroes. When we were younger, we got some really cool stuff that not necessarily everybody watched, but Power Rangers was like an early iteration of whatever a super team would be and Avengers would be. You know what I mean on the big screen, or even just thinking about we did get Justice League at a very young age. To be honest, we were lucky to have Justice League, I think, and things of that nature, and so. It was really easy to get into a lot of these things. Spider-Man is my favorite hero and was my favorite hero, at least at the time. I had Spider-Man blanket. My mom took me to see the movie when it first came out a long time ago. I was surprised she even went with me to go watch it. We used to go to the drive-in. I actually remember watching Batman Begins at the drive-in, super dark movie. Watching on the big old driving screen, you could barely see anything, but I still had a great time. You know what I mean? And so my relationship with it is pretty much that, finding friends at school, right? And talking about these things and being like, oh, what superhero are you? What superhero would you be? Even TV shows like Teen Titans, like, yeah, I'm Beast Boy. Oh, there's a girl in the group, I'm Raven. And just having fun with things like that. So I've always, again, just kind of been in it when it comes to just superhero content. And again, of course, as Jordan just said, everything explodes in that 2008 era when it comes to franchise. And yeah, man, here we are years later, still in it.
Absolutely. And what's your relationship with the MCU in particular, Ben? Because obviously we're here to talk about Loki today. So everyone always says post Endgame it's been a completely different ball game in terms of the quality and everything else that we've had. So how have you guys progressed with the MCU? Like, Jordan, have you been loving everything post Endgame, or was that the peak that we're never going to be able to get beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty vocal that I have not loved everything, which is not, I think, a surprise. I think a lot of people feel that way, and it's the nature of kind of the corporate machine that is overseeing all of this stuff. I think that there was a desire to want more after you see what happened with Endgame and Infinity War, how successful those movies were. So obviously, as a company, they're going to mass produce more of that stuff. But I think with that being a reality, there's naturally going to be a decline in quality because you can only control that quality so much when you have a larger output. And so I think that that's just kind of the way things have transitioned for Marvel and the MCU. They have to really figure out what they want to be. Do they want to produce 12 things a year and see the quality dip, or do they want to go back to kind of what brought them to the dance and maybe make 2 or 3 things a year and really excel at those at a high level? So that 10-11 year stretch was, I mean, it was phenomenal, and pretty much everything they put out I loved, or at least at the very least I really enjoyed it. And I don't think we can get back to the heights of what we achieved with Endgame and what we saw. That is just, I mean, that's really once in a generation type of stuff. There's only one other or two other movies that have achieved something of that level. So it doesn't really happen. And so I would be very shocked to see if we ever get back to that level. But that's not to say that there isn't good stuff still ahead. I think that there's a lot of great things we can be excited about. They still have some of their biggest properties to really unleash upon us. And if they can knock those out of the park, I think you can see a lot of this fan base start to feel like things are moving in a more exciting direction again.
Yeah, it does, because a lot of people have turned around and said, with their COVID and everything that happened during that
Hmm.
phase, and the fact that they couldn't really intermingle the films the way they've previously done, so everything was a little bit separated and stood on its own, and nothing really mentioned other events that were going on. And now they've been able to sort of get through that, and they can go back to doing that, and everything is becoming a bit more interlinked again. In the run up to like Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, the fact that we're going to be getting things like Deadpool 3, which is obviously going to be breaking the multiverse a bit more. We're going to get the Fantastic Four and hopefully, obviously, moving more towards the X-Men as well. Do you think that we are going to be able to see Marvel at its peak again, going towards those two big Avengers films in a few years' time?
Yeah, I think it will move towards a peak. I think you both have kind of already said it, where Infinity War and Endgame is just lightning in a bottle. It's its own beast that I'm not sure we'll ever be able to touch again. But that doesn't mean that we can't get close. You know what I'm saying? In between X-Men, Fantastic Four, Deadpool, all of these things, these big properties, I think we can go towards another peak, a different kind of peak, maybe one that we don't have to necessarily compare. Like, oh wow, this is still really good stuff that we're getting here with Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars and all of that. Because on paper, it all does look good. In something, I think, specifically comic fans, right? Comic fans who know about Secret Wars, who knows what goes down in Secret Wars. It's definitely something to get excited about. I still can't imagine seeing Secret Wars on the big screen. It doesn't even make sense to me.
No.
It's still insane. But I think if they can, again, run their race and do it slowly and steadily and right, I think right is more important. Then we can come out on top and say, yeah, that was a peak. It might not have been Endgame Infinity War peak, but it's still a peak. Especially going with the slumps and the ups and downs and the roller coasters that we've been going through. So I definitely still think it's possible. I just think it'll be a different kind of peak by the end of it all.
Absolutely. And with the news that we've had, well, the strikes are over to start with, which is obviously fantastic news. It's great that they've finally been able to get a deal that they're happy with. But it obviously has meant a lot of delays for a lot of things. And we've been hit over the last few days with more delays for Marvel films coming out. So Deadpool's been pushed back, Captain America 4, Thunderbolts, and Blade, which has had obviously its own issues for a long time. I think originally it was slated to be coming out around about now, Blade, and the fact we're not going to get it for another couple of years still. So next year is going to be a weird year for Marvel, because with the delays and everything being pushed back, it means, I think for the first time pretty much since the MCU started, they're only going to have one MCU film coming out for the entire year, which is going to be Deadpool 3. So how excited are you guys for Deadpool 3, by the way? Every time I've asked someone this question in terms of what's your favourite upcoming project, Deadpool 3 has pretty much been the top of everyone's list. So
Yeah.
are you glad that that's just one thing we get to... Obviously, we're going to have a couple of series drop next year, but are you guys just happy that, look, we can have 1 year where we just get to focus on one big project and we get to love over Deadpool for the entire year?
Yeah, I mean, if it is one project that we get, Deadpool 3 would be the one that I would choose. Like, give me that as soon as we can possibly get it. And I was really worried with the strike, just because I know that they still have at least like half of their filming to kind of finish out the film. So I was a bit skeptical as to whether or not it can come out next year. And it still very well may not come out next year. I think we've obviously seen over the past few months that this stuff is just changing all the time, so there's really no guarantee until you're kind of sitting down in that movie theater watching the film. But Deadpool 3 has a tremendous opportunity to really do something, I think, special. Those previous two films, love those. Ryan Reynolds and that whole team, they just do such a great job at taking care of that character and making sure that he feels true to the comic book counterpart, of course. And obviously just the prospects of what's there with Hugh Jackman coming back as Wolverine. I think normally I'd be a little hesitant just based off of, the fact that he had a pretty perfect send-off in Logan. But everybody always wanted to see Deadpool and Wolverine in a film properly together. We can't count X-Men Origins. That's not a real thing.
No.
So for this one exception, I'm like, you know what? We can let Logan be what it was. And they obviously, I think, know that, while still having fun with this adventure. And obviously there's multiversal sort of implications. So super excited. And hopefully, if that is the one solo movie that we get, hopefully it sticks to it and it could be Deadpool 3.
And Des, do you think it's the perfect film to follow on from the end of Loki, because we know we're getting Mobius and the TVA into Deadpool, so all getting interlinked again? How excited are you for this particular film?
Yeah, I now it's the only MCU film coming out next year. I'm absolutely excited. It's like the one thing that we're gonna get out of next year again beyond Echo and whatever else they decide to throw in there. But I think Deadpool is a chance for us to just have fun with something. I don't know. A lot of the MCU fans, a lot of us are really a lot of the casual fans too are always looking for like the next big thing, if that makes sense. Oh, what's the post-credit scene going to be? What's this going to be? I think Deadpool 3 is just a chance for everybody to just turn your brain off and have a good time with this movie. Don't think too much. don't stress about what the MCU has going on. Like, this is our break, right? Like, there's not a lot coming out next year. This is our break. So let's take this film in. And I think that makes me excited to get into some of that Deadpool Wolverine content, man, because Ryan Reynolds, we already know, is born to play the part. Hugh Jackman very clearly is born to play. These are like two of the most accurate casted people we've ever seen in a movie, and they're finally working together again outside of X-Men Origins. They're finally working together on screen in a main story plot. Of course, I think it'll advance the MCU in weird ways, but this is some real mutant content we're about to get. You know what I mean? And I'm pretty excited just for that. Like, oh, this is X-Men stuff, coming to the big screen, and so I'm excited for Deadpool to be playful. Not only that, but for it to be rated R. I think that's a big, huge thing that Marvel is about to kick in the door for when it comes to Deadpool. So I'm excited for all of that.
Do you think Marvel have maybe missed a little trick? Because I was saying that I was hoping that if there was a post-credit scene at the end of Loki, so you've got the finales, it was at the very end there was like a little post-credit scene that linked into Deadpool. So maybe like Deadpool steps through a door, or like we just focused on Deadpool and there's like a TVA door behind him that pops open and he's like, "What the fuck?" Do you think? I know that obviously if they haven't finished maybe necessarily doing all the filming, they haven't really had a chance to do that. But do you think they missed a trick there by not having that sort of tie-in, or does it not really matter? I think it would have been nice to have that.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing, just because I mean it's been such a long time since that last Deadpool movie, so I think everybody is very much eager and ready to see what that's going to be, and knowing that there is going to be that TVA connection with Mobius, Miss Minutes, whoever else. There could have been a nice tie-in somewhere. The only thing I will say, I guess, just based off of what we've seen out of Loki, tonally, I don't know if that would have made sense with the story that they ended off with here in Loki, because Deadpool is obviously on the other end of the spectrum, which is completely goofy and silly and mature and R-rated, and so I don't know where that might have fit in with how things ended off with Loki. But maybe with one of these other projects, who's to say that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they'll really have a chance now at this point with so much little that's coming out between now and Deadpool. Maybe there could have been another opportunity, but I definitely get the sense of wanting to see something to tie into that to get people really excited.
So let's just take Deadpool out the equation for the time being then. But out of everything else that we've got slated over the next 3, 4, 5 years, Des, what's your favourite project upcoming that you're really looking forward to and can't wait to see out of everything else?
Man, that's a hard question because everything is so wishy-washy to me right now. I don't know how to feel about a lot of these projects. I don't know how I feel about Captain America. I don't know how I feel about Thunderbolts. I don't know how I feel about a lot of these things. Again, I just as a fan and a nerd of Blade, I part of me still just wants to say Blade, no matter how ridiculous, of whatever it's going through. It's like if they can get it out the door and if it's good, of course I would want to see that. But even that has kind of left a small sour taste in my mouth. But I think over everything, it's probably between that and just Fantastic Four, man. I think Fantastic Four has the ability to set up so much in the MCU, like Infinity Saga, multiple level movies of like setup. It definitely has that potential. So we'll see what happens with Fantastic Four.
John, what about you?
Yeah, it's tough, and one thing that Des and I were talking about after we saw the Marvels that I realized it was the fact that we have gotten a lot that they have promised us. Like, a lot of this stuff has come out. There's not many projects really left, at least in terms of the announced things that remain in the saga. I think there's 5 movies, maybe 4 or 5 TV shows still left. So we've gotten through the vast majority of it. But for the sake of variety, because I would have chose Fantastic Four as well, but for the sake of variety, I will say Daredevil Born Again, despite the reports that have come out about, the recent changes. which had me very nervous and worried, and still kind of does. But I think that there's still a great opportunity to really establish a new corner of the MCU with Daredevil Born Again. It feels like they might be, really trying to kickstart that with Echo based off of that trailer and apparently this new Marvel Spotlight brand that they're looking to launch. But I think Daredevil, can really kick that door open and kind of lead the charge in that front, with Punisher and Kingpin and Echo if they want to fold that back in. But, hopefully one day, this isn't a real project as of yet, but we really need some Daredevil and Spider-Man projects together. Like that, that has to happen. So if they can get Daredevil Born Again right, and then whenever they figure out what Tom Holland is going to do next, I would love for that to start to come together to see what opportunities exist there.
I'm with you on the Daredevil one, man. That's pretty much been up there. It's my favorite project upcoming. I'm a huge Punisher fan as well, so I can't wait to see John Bernthal back as the Punisher. I always had Kang Dynasty up there. It's probably alongside Daredevil as my favorite upcoming project that I want to see. I think what we've seen of Jonathan Majors is the various different Kangs, Victor Timely, He Who Remains. I've been absolutely enthralled by his performances, and I really can't wait to see Kang open a can of whoop ass on all these Avengers and really just show them who's the boss. Because I think everyone felt maybe the same about the end of Ant-Man Quantumania, the fact that they seem to have done a quick rewrite of the ending, and where he actually gets defeated at the end instead, where that wasn't supposed to happen, and that felt like a bit of a letdown of the character. And everyone's like, how can he get beaten by ants? And I was like, well, he's in the quantum realm, he's the master of time and space, but quantum realm's a bit different. Plus going up against thousands of ants who have had a 1,000 years to progress their own tech, it's kind of like a bit of a curveball for him. So he's like, you can maybe accept just about the reasoning of his defeat, but still, I was like, I want to see more of it. I'm really excited to see it moving forward. But yeah, Daredevil, I'm with you on that one. Can't wait for it, especially since I was actually excited by the change of the news, to be fair. The fact that they're scrapping a lot of things, they're bringing in showrunners again, instead of having like different directors for each episode. The fact they're bringing in the writers from Loki and from Punisher, I felt it's going to give it the, sort of a really good solid base to go. So I'm actually really excited about these changes, to be fair. So can't wait to see where that goes. Now, as always, since we're reviewing an MCU show, we're going to play the most pointless game in podcast history. So it's time for another episode of MCU or Real Life You. So, as always, the aim of this game is that I'm going to give you each an MCU character, the real-life actor or actress that plays them, and your podcast co-host. And I want you guys to tell me who you'd rather spend the day at the theme park with. So who do you want to hit the rides with? Who do you want to eat all the sweets with? Who do you want to go and have dinner with at the end of the day? And, don't hold back. If you don't want to name your co-hosts, don't care for their feelings. Just be brutal about it. This is what we're here to do. We're here to split up podcasts and no jokes. You're going to get a couple of choices each, or a couple of turns each on this. So, Jordan, we're going to start with you. So I'm going to give you Sam Wilson, Anthony Mackie, or your co-host Des. Who would you rather spend the day with at the theme park and do all the stuff with?
This is actually harder than I thought. I thought it like the first choice would be kind of obvious, but that's a good potential situation to be in. You know what? I'm choosing Dez on this one, and I'm being totally honest. Like Anthony Mackie, he's a really good actor. I like him. I think he's pretty good, but in terms of spending the entire day with him at a theme park, I don't know if that's like exactly the person that I would choose like off the top. So I'm gonna stick with Dez on this one. I think that'll be a better time.
Okay, fair. I like it. So Des, we've got your first choices. So we've got Shang-Chi, Simu Liu, or your co-host Jordan.
Simu
Liu
Liu
spend the day with Shang-Chi or Barbie or Ken? Sorry, I should say.
Right.
I forgot. I always forget he's in that movie. Man. I'm gonna go with Simu Liu. He's way different than Anthony Mackie. he's a good time. You just look at him, it's a good time. Anthony Mackie, like Jordan said, he might have like a couple hours in him. You know what I'm saying? He seems like he might get tired after a while. Simu Liu seems like he's ready to go all the time. You know what I mean? I think he'd be pretty fun at a theme park.
He's got the energy to go all day. Fair. I like it. So, Des, I'm going to give you your second choices now. So we've got Thor, and I'm going to allow you to choose any iteration from the MCU of Thor. So whether it's the earlier series Thor or the later, Ragnarok, Love and Thunder Thor. Chris Hemsworth, obviously, or your co-host over on to the side of you there.
Man, yeah. Ragnarok Thor is a crazy good time. He's a crazy good time. I have to go Ragnarok Thor. I don't even know, to be honest, I feel like I don't even know how long we'd be at the theme park, like actually riding rides. I feel like we'd find some other stuff to get into somewhere else. That is ridiculous. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Ragnarok Thor.
Do you think if you'd have picked Love and Thunder Thor, you'd been like, these rides are ridiculously bad. Let me get my goats and we'll ride off on these.
That's also hilarious.
The goats. What a substitute for a ride, because they
that could be a fun ride though.
Yeah, they'd be enough entertainment for sure.
Yeah, screaming goats and then Stormbreaker just being a bit passive aggressive the entire time because you're getting ignored. That would be fun. And then the last choice for this week and for this series, to be fair, so it all falls on you, Jordan. So, would you prefer to spend the day at a theme park with Monica Rambeau of Marvels and for some reason the name escapes me, WandaVision, Tayona Paris, or your co-host Des?
Come on now. Come on, Tiana Paris.
She's right. Yes,
yeah, I'm
the only right choice.
He understand like that is. look, that is. I mean, one, she seems like a fascinating person to like really get to know. Like, I would just love to know her life story and just like hang out with her. But she's gorgeous and beautiful as well, and that would be a dream. I probably would be speechless the entire time. I'd probably fall on my face.
I'm nervous.
And she would leave the theme park after a while because I would not be able to engage with any real conversation with her because I'd be pretty starstruck. But yeah, I'm choosing Tiana Paris, Monica Rambeau.
Nice. A good choice to end this particular series with. But that was our season finale of MCU or Real Life You. Now, on to the week's main event. The reason that we're all here, Loki series finale, episode 6. Like I say, I finished watching this not that long ago, so my head is still spinning. I'm thinking about everything that's come out of it. You guys, did you get to watch this last night?
Yeah, it was late last night after we saw the Marvel, so came back and tried to get like right into it.
What a double header.
Yeah, exactly. Because I forgot that for us, it's 9 p.m. on the East Coast, which, we were like pretty much still at the movies at that point. So yeah, came back pretty much and started it up immediately.
Yep.
No, I'm jealous you got to see it last night. I know it's like lunchtime for you guys now, but it's like 6 o'clock in the evening. I had to wait all day, avoid social media, and then get into it as soon as I finished work. But what an episode. So running up though, I mean, essentially series 1 and series 2 have been one long series in a way, because series 2 picked up literally right where series 1 left off. So if we treat this as one whole series, Des, how have you been feeling about this whole Loki series?
Man, I've honestly been enjoying it a lot, and they keep, I think, subverting my expectations. There are always moments in Loki. It's always like one episode in there or episode and a half. I'm like, oh, that was just okay. We'll see how this thing turns around, and then all of a sudden they hit me over the head with something that I absolutely love. And so Loki has been a ride, right? It's one of our early MCU shows that we do get, around pandemic time. Everyone's like, oh, what is the show? What's going on? What's Loki going to be? And I have to say, I really enjoy and love it. It's for sure, I think, my favorite MCU show. And I think Tom Hiddleston has just graduated as one of the GOATs of the MCU, to be honest. He has really been killing it. And I think this show it's almost like a showcase of what the MCU could be if they care about everything this much, if that makes sense. And you can tell Loki, by the end of it all, by the end of season 2, you're like, man, they really cared about this show. Everything, the writing, the score, the acting, all of it, the way it looks. And again, in a lot of ways, it's endearing. Like, man, I love this show. And in some other ways, it's just slightly disappointing because, like, why didn't you put this energy into everything else? You know what I mean? Kind of feeling. I wish they would have, but man, overall, I really must say Loki is it's a big surprise, because I never thought we'd be here with this character in this way in the MCU. So yeah, I've definitely been enjoying myself, and I think, you know, so far and by far, this is the best Marvel Cinematic Universe show that we've gotten.
Nice. Jordan, hit us with your thoughts.
You know, Loki is I think it's clear and indicative just based off of what we've seen, and especially with what you just said, that it really is just like one long series divided up into two parts, that they had a vision for the show from the very beginning. And I think that that's what makes it different than all these other shows that we've gotten on Disney Plus, which were conceived in a manner in which I think that they were more so satisfying the interests of the company and of the streaming service, where it's like, we need more characters, we need more shows, we need more content for Disney Plus. And that's not to say that there isn't merit in some of those other properties that we've gotten, because I do think that there are highlights and moments that I've enjoyed, especially in things like WandaVision, you know, which I think is, you know, another pretty exceptional show that they've done. But Loki it's pretty clear from the get-go that they understood what this was meant to be. One big story told in two parts, divided over two seasons. And they stuck the landing, and I totally agree, you know, with Des that it's the best MCU show that I think we've gotten, and it's really a clear example of if this multiverse saga could be anything, this is how high it could sort of achieve, you know, a certain sort of level and status if we put that time and attention and care into every property, or get there as close as possible. Because I think so far multiverse stuff has been very hit or miss, but this shows how far you can really go with it and how emotionally profound it could still be. I think we've all had questions about the stakes, or at least I have. I'll speak for myself. We've had questions about the stakes and how much can we connect to variants and other universes and other multiverses when we have our own. But I think Loki did a pretty exceptional job at showcasing how that's done from an emotional standpoint, which I think is really the most important thing at the end of the day.
Mm. So you're sitting there, the credits roll on the episode when you watched it last night. What were your initial thoughts at the end of this episode and the end of this series?
Man, it was I think for me, as the credits rolled, the first thing that came to mind was, if this is it for the character, I am 1000% okay with that, because this felt like a definitive ending for Loki and for what the journey of that character has been. We've seen multiple endings at this point. He's been a character that's come back and has found a way to resurrect himself over and over and over again. But I'd be shocked if you could top what they did here, from an emotional standpoint, from a payoff standpoint, from just a character development standpoint. I'd be pretty shocked to see where else they could go with him. But I thought that when they started Loki, you know, I thought that the way he ended in Infinity War at the hands of Thanos, I thought that was pretty poetic, you know. But here they just took it to much further degrees, and I'm glad that they did. But when the credits rolled, I was like, this could be it, and I'd be totally okay with that.
Des, what were your thoughts after finishing the episode?
Wow. That was literally my thoughts. Like, did they just they didn't just stick the land, they stuck the hell out of that landing. I mean, this was legit one of my favorite episodes of TV for the year. I was like, what are we doing? What I did not expect this. And I think one of my favorite things about this show, to be honest, is the score. So score is playing in my mind as the credits are rolling constantly. Like, I really enjoyed the music in this show, but I absolutely agree that this feels like a definitive ending for the character. They have literally closed the book of Loki, and you know, there's a reason episode 1, season 1 is Glorious Purpose, and this episode is called Glorious Purpose. There's a reason they decided for it to come full circle like that. The all of it, the Ouroboros, all of it. There's a reason that they decided to come to an end and make it definitive in that way. And yeah, this is what the definition. I think this is another thing I was thinking of. I was like, yeah, that's a character arc. That was my thoughts. Like, that is an arc, a complete beginning, middle, and end. I don't need to see anything else after. I don't need a prequel. I don't need to see anything else before it. That is a complete character arc. And that's what really spun through my mind. And I agree. If I don't see him again, I would completely understand. Because you know why? Because we know where he is. You know what I mean? We know exactly where he's at. And I think we're all okay with that. So that's what was going through my mind.
Two very well said statements, gentlemen. I absolutely agree with both of them, to be fair, about everything about this episode. I was absolutely astonished at the end of it. I'm always left a bit disappointed with the finales, I think, a lot in TV series, generally because they leave so many questions to be answered moving forward. Whilst there are definite still maybe some questions you could put forward at the end of this particular series, I think it answered enough things as well to felt like a well-rounded ending. Which to me was what it needed as well, because I don't know about you guys, episode 5, last week's episode, I was a little bit disappointed. I understand they're setting it up for something big, but it felt like the first time we'd had a real maybe filler episode for the entire series. And so moving on to this week, and I was a bit worried at the start because we're going to get into it in a moment, but the fact that they were just doing him repeating things over and over again, and I was like, oh, are they going to fill in half this episode before they really do anything? And then it all just worked to a great ending. And what's been fantastic for me about this series, like you said, the character development, just going through it from start to end, has been one of the most complete ones I think we've ever seen in the MCU. There's been some good character development with some characters in there, and there's been a lot which have just been left dangling because they want to continue it further down the line or bring the characters back. But this has been one of the most complete character arcs I think I've seen in any franchise anywhere. From what we get, in the first Thor, through to Infinity War, through to bringing this particular Loki back who wasn't the same, and then developing him to this point. And what it's felt like when you put the two series together, it feels like a short period of time for him. It doesn't feel like necessarily a lot of time has passed for this particular Loki, but what he's gone through in that time and the distance that he's travelled for his character arc and character development has been pretty epic. So I think we can all agree this series has ended on such a fantastic note. But let's get a little bit into the episode then. So it starts off with Loki saying he knows what he's got to do. He's going through his time slipping. He's like, right, we've got to do it quicker. So he's there like rushing Victor Timely out. We've got to go quicker. Let's go and do it. And every time he's getting spaghettified. And then he's like, right, so I need to learn how to help them build the throughput multiplier better. So he's like, to AB, he's like, how long will it take me to learn everything I know about physics and engineering and all this sort of stuff? And he's like, centuries.
A long time.
And he's like, yeah.
To say the least.
So he's like, cool, okay. And then he just get the thing, it was like centuries later. And he's there and he's helping them do it really quickly and stuff. What were your guys thought about all this sort of beginning bit of the episode? Des, kick us off.
Man, what a crazy way to get into it. One, it was really cool because he ends episode 5 learning how to control the time slipping, right? I was like, now it's time for him to go fix everything. And I think I love the ambition that he has when he actually spends centuries learning the physics that it takes to make this throughput multiplier. I thought that was crazy. But I like the energy coming into it because in a lot of ways it's hopeful, but not only that, but you see kind of the resolve in his eyes after that, after he feels out he knows at that moment that he can do it, if that makes sense. A lot of the season we're like, man, we don't know how to do this. We have an idea of how to do it, but we don't know how anything is going to take. Everything is a rush. Now he's like, I have all the time in the world to fix this thing. Now I actually get to fix this thing. And I think that's an interesting idea because a lot of us never get that chance, right? To feel like we have all the time in the world to fix something. And now Loki I feel like he kind of has that within him in that moment. Like, I have all the time in the world to figure out how to fix this. So I think that's a very interesting kind of, thing to work through.
And then we get to this point where he's able to sort it all out and get the throughput multiplier, and he's just talking them and rushing them all through it very quickly. He's like, right, so we need to do this, you need to do that, you need to get out there and you just need to go, and they finally managed to get it done. So it's obvious that he's always like, make sure that you latch the helmet, don't put the throughput multiplier on the floor because it's going to roll off the side. And you're like, obviously it's been centuries, how many times has he attempted this genuinely? And so he's like, he's probably been through this millions of times and he knows everything down to the T, which you can probably see from the way he directs them all to do it. And it looks like they finally succeeded. Get the throughput multiplier into the temporal loom. Victor makes it back, and he thinks it's all sorted. And the readings start going to pot. and they obviously work out that, because the branches are infinitely growing, the temporal loom can't infinitely grow, and therefore they're never going to be able to succeed, and it explodes again. And he kind of realizes at that moment that maybe it's that old adage of what Sylvie says to him, I think in the last series, where he's like, a Loki's always destined to lose. And you kind of see the resignation on his face a little bit. Jordan, how are you feeling about this potential success of getting the whole plan finally sorted, and then it finally realizing that it's never going to work?
Yeah, in this moment as I was watching, things were moving at such a fast pace that I checked the timestamp on Disney Plus of the episode, which I never do. Like I never actively check to see how much time is left. Like I'm really engrossed with an episode, but this particular portion here, it felt like so much had happened, but it really hadn't been that much stuff. I think it was just the pacing of it and the fact that we felt like we were going through this over and over and over again. So it's a brilliant editing job, on the part of what they did there to put the sequence together. But then when I realized that this was far from the end, like we had pretty much made it through not even half of the episode, really, like maybe close to that halfway point, and that essentially this was going to be a failure, I was just like, well, wow, like what else can they do that's going to, feel really, really important to trying to figure out the solution in this problem. But, thinking about that constant idea that Lokis are destined to lose, and that's kind of always been their purpose. That stuck out for sure in this moment, thinking that there probably wasn't going to be a happy, I guess, quote unquote, happy ending for this. There could be something that's resolute and definitive, but I don't know if it was going to be happy. It was probably going to be a little bit more poignant and sad. I started to like have that feeling really seep in at this moment, because it started to stand out in particular that there's not really a way around this per se. There's kind of a way, maybe a way through, potentially, but it's gonna come at a great cost, which is ultimately what ended up happening.
And then it drops for Loki that there's someone that he has to go and see. I called this about 5 minutes before it happened. I think it was probably obvious coming up, to be fair, but I turned to my wife and I was like, he's going to have to go and visit He Who Remains and have a chat with him about how he can stop the temporal loom. And then I think he realizes this is what he's got to do. So we get the return of this dude right here, which I loved seeing this guy at the end of series 1. The episode finale of series 1 was probably my favorite episode of that series. I loved all the stuff with He Who Remains. So the fact that they're going back to the settler at the end of time and we're going to get more of him, to me, I was super excited by. So he arrives back there, and obviously his time slipped into his body. And then he starts this repeating cycle all over again, as if he hasn't just been doing it for centuries, where he's trying to stop Sylvie from killing him. And he obviously must have watched it hundreds, if not thousands of times, where he just kind of gets his ass whooped by Sylvie every single time, and she kills him every single time. And I don't know why he hasn't actually, instead of fighting her every time, he hasn't just stopped her and gone, let me explain absolutely everything that I've just been through, and then we can see how you feel after it, sort of attitude. But Jordan, kick us off in terms of going back and then having to go through loops all over again fighting Sylvie. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I was a little nervous at this point, because I'm like, okay, well, I don't want this episode to be too repetitive of the same thing that we just did. Like, we're going to see the sequence play out over and over and over again. But the way that it was played here felt different than the first time, because the first time, I think, as you're watching it, you have hope. Like, okay, he's going to go through this. It's going to take centuries, but we're going to get there. He's going to figure out how to save the temporal loom from essentially imploding. And then we see that doesn't happen. And so when you arrive to this point, it's like, well, he's not going to kill Sylvie. Like, I just can't see that happening. So this one felt a little bit more sad to watch him just go through this and take more time to try to just like play out the scenario and over and over and over again. And so as I was watching that, I'm like, okay, this is becoming really this is becoming like really tragic in a sense, to see that, there's no amount of time that he can buy himself that's going to solve this issue, which almost for a moment there felt inevitable, that this has always been destined to happen. And then they once again just like kind of turned it on its head and subvert expectations. And you see that He Who Remains has been very aware of this the entire time, which is like one of the more shocking moments of the episode, is as you started to point out the fact that they have a conversation that I did not see coming. And I thought that was a really, really great moment that they paid off.
Yeah, this is definitely something I wanted to obviously chat a bit more about with you guys, because, we had this whole thing in season 1 where essentially He Who Remains had said to Sylvie, everything that's happened to you in terms of being taken by the TVA, everything that you've gone through to get to here is like, I paved the road to make that happen, to get you to this choice, whether you kill me or whether you take my place. And, Loki is just here along for the ride with you. And it turns out they flipped it on his head, and all along, He Remains who's been setting Loki down this path to get to the point where he's been through all this stuff, and now he's at the point where he's got to make this choice of, he either works with He Who Remains and keeps things as they are and keeps that sacred timeline in place, or he kills Sylvie and he kills Sylvie to stop all that from happening, or he lets Sylvie kill He Who Remains, the temporal loom explodes, all the timelines are gone, and it's disaster all round. Des, tell me, what were you feeling? Because this to me was a huge moment in this series in terms of, I love the parallel from season 1 where he's like, I paved the road for you, Sylvie, and now we find out that it's actually all been about Loki this entire time.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about the strategy behind He Who Remains. There's a moment, or not a moment, but we go through season 1 and we get to He Who Remains, like, man, this dude is really a sees all, knows all, hears all, you know what I mean, kind of person. And then when he dies, you kind of feel like it's the end of that. And then somehow he finds a way to subvert those expectations again. And you're like, wait, you're telling me that all of this is supposed to happen anyway, where, Loki's going through all of this and we meet again? I thought that was pretty crazy, because it added even more, I think, kind of fear to He Who Remains in a couple of different ways. You said you were above all of this and all of these things and you set up all of these things and we believed you, but this is like another level of you knew all of this was going to, this is so much has happened since then to get us to this point of Loki returning that to be honest, I couldn't believe we were back here again in this way. And I really enjoyed that. Because there was a lot of, I don't know, I feel like from the writing side of things, that takes a lot of thinking. You know what I mean? It takes a lot of logic to get back here and a lot of planning, a lot of storyboarding for all of this to make sense, for He Who Remains to be like, oh yeah, I was hoping you'd be here at some point in this way. Oh, that time slipping? Yes, I did that. I also paved that way. Who do you think did that? And yeah, I don't know, it's a really crazy concept, I think, to wrap your head around, yeah, it's just really complicated, and it's really cool though by the end of it all. But it definitely adds a lot of, I think, complexity, and again, a little bit of fear in He Who Remains, because wow, you were not playing when you said, you were really that guy at the end of time. And so what a meticulous person, to do all those things. But I also love I love the attention to really just bring it all around. I never thought, you said you predicted we would see He Who Remains again. In my mind, I'm like, that dude's gone. We won't see him ever again. And so this was a surprise for me when I was like, wait, did he just say that? Did he just stop Loki and be like, wait a minute, how many times have you been through this? That's the moment I was like, oh yeah, no, this is different. This guy is different. So I'm really glad they decided to put this in here, to be honest. I thought it was really cool and really well thought out.
It's absolutely mind-bending, to be fair, that they thought through this plan for He Who Remains, in terms of, he's like, I've set Sylvie down this path that's going to bring her to me, and she's going to kill me, which is going to unleash everything that happens to Loki. But Loki's going to be able to time slip and come back to a point before Sylvie technically kills me, and I can chat to him about the entire plan, and he's got to make a choice then of what to do moving forward, before he then time slips out of his own body that's at the end of the time, that's then Sylvie kicks through a time door and is able to kill He Who Remains. I could literally spend hours unraveling that in my mind about the intricacies of that plan. And the fact that it's also revealed that He Who Remains, obviously has done everything. The fact that he sent Victor Timely down that path as well, in particular, and everything, it just absolutely boggles the mind that that's the kind of plan he can come up with, that I plan someone to get down this timeline that's going to lead to my death, but at the same point put someone that's going to go on a timeline and plan that reaches further beyond that and still be able to come back to a point in time to talk to me before I'm killed. It absolutely baffles my mind a little bit that he could do that. And like you said, it adds a bit of extra fear, because Loki was already kind of scared at this dude, and they hadn't had that much interaction at the end of season 1. We see at the start of season 2, even when we see when he sees Victor Timely for the first time, and how scared he is that this dude is here. And then this just puts an extra level on top of it for me of just how far above everything else and how clever this guy is. I think to have that kind of contingency plan was absolutely unreal. Cool thing as well, though, Loki not only learned to control his time slipping, he's learned how to freeze time. He that cool moment when he remains using his tempad to do it, and he's like freezing Sylvie, and then Loki like turns around and freezes her with like a click of his finger, and he's like, "What makes you think I haven't? This is the first time we've had this conversation. I've learned to do this already." Loki seems. I mean, I think where we were at the end of the last episode, it seemed like we were going down the route of where Loki was going to be turned into Loki, God of Stories. Mm-hmm. And with the ability now to be able to stop time, let alone control his time slipping, do you guys have any thoughts about whether he was going to turn into that person from the comics, or were you just waiting to see what they did with him, rather you were that bothered about it or not?
Yeah, I think we had talked about it on our own show that it felt like that's the path that they were going down with the God of Stories, which I think that this is still a version of that. But one of the things I think about the MCU that is a brilliant sort of a brilliant choice that they tend to make is that they often signal and hint at things without actually naming them. I mean, it took us 11 years to hear Avengers Assemble, for goodness sake, so they take their time with actually calling things out. And so while we never heard him officially proclaimed as the God of Stories, we never heard those words uttered per se. I still think that, you can infer that this is something of that version of the character, that this could be that. And if they do decide to bring Loki back in some capacity and they decide to have him proclaim himself as the God of Stories in Secret Wars, I don't know, that's gonna elicit a very emotional response from people. Like, people are gonna cheer at that, and that's again a part of the brilliance of how they can sort of infer things without actually naming them and taking their time and having patience with actually calling certain things out. And so while they didn't necessarily explicitly say that at this point, I wasn't bothered by that, because I think you can look at several different things of what this version of the character might be, whether it's the God of Stories, or maybe they call it the God of Time, or is he now the new He Who Remains? Like, whatever that looks like, it all works together. I think it all makes sense still. And so, I think that that's the more important element, that we know what his purpose is, essentially in terms of what he's meant to do and what his sacrifice represents. That's the more important element, as opposed to the specific name or terminology that they might pull over from the comics.
So at the end of his conversation with He Who Remains, it seemed like there was the only two choices that he had, and I genuinely thought that he was going to kill Sylvie. Des, did you think that was going to happen at all, or was it too much of an obvious thing that wouldn't happen? Because anyone who listens to my show knows I like a bit of death in series. I think sometimes it's not realistic that everyone makes it through unscathed all the time, and I like a good character death in there. And I was thinking, this would be a good moment. It would be shocking to actually kill Sylvie off at this moment in time, or have him kill her at that point in the story. Did you think that was going to happen at all, or were you just like, nah?
Yeah, I did, actually. I thought I think that's what makes this episode so good. They constantly change your expectations of what you think might happen over and over. And by the end of it, you're just like, oh, wow, that's what we decided to go with. But I think, I definitely thought that there was a moment I was like, he's going to have to kill Sylvie. And I've been talking about how the series has been very poetic for me. Like, again, the lines they've been saying have been really good. There's been just a lot of good points being made, whether it's, things about burden and purpose and all of those things. But there was a moment in my mind, I thought it was poetic, that he would have to kill a version of himself in order to save everything, and I was like, dang, that also kind of makes sense. Again, especially in that moment where you're like, there's no other way around Sylvie killing He Who Remains except to kill Sylvie. It felt very not necessarily black and white, but I was like, this seems like the only choice in my mind to me. But I love the decision for Loki to have to talk to Sylvie first. That is like a whole different ball game, right? When he has to talk to Sylvie first before he does anything. She's like, don't think I'm gonna give you my permission, to kill me. But it really is like, again, that's even poetic in itself. Like, before I go through with this thing, let me talk to the person I might have to do it to. And I think, that's another good opportunity and another good moment to again subvert those expectations, man, to change the narrative. And we're talking about God of Stories. It's really what this whole episode is how can we change the narrative, not only from Loki's perspective, right, as a character, but they were doing that from a writing perspective as well. And I thought it was brilliantly done.
Absolutely. I did think it was going to be quite amazing. I thought this was maybe a point where when he'd gone back to see Sylvie when he was with everyone else at the end of the last episode, and everyone was getting spaghettified, and he, stops time or puts them outside of time so it doesn't affect them. And he, she works out pretty damn quickly that this was the scenario that he's got to work out if he needs to kill her or not to save the temporal loom from exploding and save everything else. And I thought it was pretty damn quick of her to work that out so quickly when it's taken him 2 series to get to this point of working out what needs to be done.
Yeah.
But I did also thought, it was a nice emotional touch, I think, to put her in there. And I thought maybe I've had a little bit of beef with Sylvie and the fact that whilst it's maybe understandable that she's not regretted any of her actions throughout these series, in terms of she wants to have her life and she was going to do anything to get it. But the fact seeing the effect of killing He Who Remains and everything that's happened after that, and it eventually leads to the timelines being killed, I thought she might actually finally apologise for all the shit that she's caused. And she's like, no, if you want to kill me, I'm still not going to do it fucking willingly.
No accountability really at
No,
all for
absolutely
any of this
none.
shit.
None.
It's really bothered me. I'm like, take responsibility for your actions, love. Jesus Christ. Like, you've caused all this, essentially, even though we find out really it wasn't all about that. It was about Loki rather than her. But anyway, it was just... Loki then seems to have worked out he's got to do what he needs to do. And at this point, I'm thinking, I don't know what he's going to do. Because it seems that he really had 2 options. He Remains has thought about this so meticulously. There can't really be a third option. He's got to work out what to do from here. So he slips himself back to the TVA, to that moment. And this is where this episode gets pretty damn amazing, even more so for me. Because we get this whole visual where he decides he was going to walk down the walkway. And I was like, it was amazing to see that transition where he's walking down and the temporal radiation's hitting him, and he turns from the stuff that he's been wearing for the last series or 2 series from the the TVA given uniform, and it turns himself into the Loki with the cloak flowing behind him and the horns coming out, and he uses his magic to basically split apart the loom and spread the timeline branches all around him. And his horns grow to their full length, and you're like, this is Loki in his glorious purpose, because we got it when in the last series towards the end when they were at the void at the end of time, and you had classic Loki played by Richard E. Grant, who said, you're far more powerful than you could ever actually know in terms of what you can do. And I think this was him tapping into that and splitting apart the temporal loom and the branches, and then because I was like, what's happening here? Is he just freed all the branches from being woven together? Is he just freed time properly? What's going on here? And obviously, Obi's like, the branches are dying, and he starts grabbing them, and he's pulling them together, and he sort of makes this thing. And that emotional moment, I think we get a lot where he's looking back at everyone in the room, and he basically to say his final goodbye to them almost in a way, isn't it? And then he walks through that that split in time and space. And we see him again, just still grabbing more of the branches, and he's sort of stepping up towards that chair at the Citadel at the end of time. And I'm going to gloat a little bit here because normally my predictions are so far off, it is absolutely unreal. But I did say after last week's episode that I would predict that by the end of this episode, Loki would be sat in the chair at the Citadel at the end of time, ruling over it all. Ruling over it, okay, maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but we get this just epic visual of him stepping up the steps towards the chair and all that sort of gold that goes up towards it as well, and makes then into the seat. And he's encased and holding on to all those branches and pulls them all together and sends his magic flowing through it. And then as it backs out, it turns into, was it Yggdrasil, the tree of life that the Asgardians themselves base everything on. Guys, what were you thinking about all this? This was absolutely unreal.
Yeah, it's overwhelming, really, just from a visual standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. There were so many things happening, because first, as he steps out, it's like, oh, he's gonna die. He's gonna literally sacrifice himself and die in the midst of trying to fix the temporal loom. But then it becomes something much greater than that, a much bolder choice, I think, and you start to see that costume emerge, which is incredible looking, by the way. I love the way that the costume looked
Absolutely.
because it's different than what he previously wore. That this feels somehow darker and more tragic in the way that it looks, but also still a little bit more regal. And I think it matches sort of the maturity that he's had over the course of the series. But then,
Mm.
I mean, just the whole visual of it was really, really phenomenal because you don't totally understand until you start to see like, wow, he is using a combination of everything that he's accumulated between his magical
Mhm.
powers, which comes from his upbringing, from his mother. And he's also using the knowledge that he just accumulated for centuries, learning the physics, the theoretical physics from OB and Victor Timely. He's also using that to really know and showcase how much he is capable of. And I think to exactly what you said, I thought about what Richard E. Grant said in that first season, that first series, that he's truly powerful beyond even what he knows. And to see him finally step into that, and we can really see just how truly awe-inspiring, Loki can be, was just a really phenomenal sight to see. And I think that whole sequence just had me. I was pretty speechless. I didn't really know how to process it and know what to say because I was just watching it like, wow, they're really going for it. This is a huge, huge swing. But it totally worked and paid off, I think.
Des, hit us.
Man, I actually could not believe what they were doing in this show. It was like the most comic booky, great like thing I had seen out of the MCU for a while, that it tugs on the heartstrings so perfectly. You know what I mean? Especially it's really the sequence before when he talks to Mobius, right? Where Mobius has that quote where he says, most purpose is burden and glory. And he said, trust me, you never want to be the guy who avoids it because you can't live with the burden. And then he actually decides to take on the burden, and he quite literally ascends to godhood. He's literally walking up steps and ascends to godhood to sit in his purpose. There's a quote that people talk about all the time, very simple: walking in your purpose. He was literally walking in his purpose. I thought it was like, I don't know what we're doing in this writer's room. I don't know what we're doing over at Marvel with this TV show, but I need more of it. It was just, I was overwhelmed with everything. And in one of the most enjoyed, or I think you just alluded to the moment where he looks back at all his friends at the TVA. There is a moment where they cut to them and they're all in the dark. And I was like, wow, they're literally in the dark. They have no idea what Loki is about to do. But by the end of it, it's bright again. And, Sylvie has that line where she's like, he's given us a chance. And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. Because again, we've talked about it. Lokis are known to lose, or they are destined to lose. Now Loki is not only whatever, god of time, the god of stories, but he's giving people a chance to win and not necessarily to lose. I was like, yeah, I don't know what we're doing. This is great. I had no words. The way it looked was amazing. The score is firing on all cylinders. I really thought this is one of my favorite sequences that I had seen, like in the MCU and in general, because it was everything leading up to it. And then the meaning behind it all is just, it was very well done. It was exceptional.
Absolutely. And I almost completely skipped by that obviously scene with Mobius that was fantastic, and the chat that they had between them. I almost thought that he was talking about, could he live with the burden of killing Sylvie? That's what he was trying to get advice about, rather than obviously the way that he's gone down it. And it makes a lot more sense now that you say that, Des, that he's literally going to have to live with the burden of he's got to leave everything behind. But all the clues were there that we always get it in the recaps at the start of every episode, is whatever they put in the recaps is relevant to that particular episode. So some people are like, oh, I skip the recap. And I'm like, why? It's telling you what's going to be relevant for this episode.
Right.
But they constantly talk about his glorious purpose, the fact that he's like, I had a throne taken from me and I was born to sit on a throne. And he gets that throne to sit on at the end of this. But I'm just going to be completely stunned, I think, for a long time with the visuals of that particular sequence. It just still blows me mind. I've only got to see it the once a few hours ago, and I'm still kind of a little bit in awe of it. But I kind of the bit where he was walking through and he did have the change from his normal outfit into the Loki outfit. I kind of thought that was ranking up there with. Did you guys watch the Ahsoka series that was on recently?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the World Between Worlds episode, when you had the transitions from like Anakin to Vader and that sort of thing, it felt like an epic level on that sort of way of doing it. Because I'm sure you can see from behind me, I'm a Star Wars fan first and foremost, and so the transitions of seeing a character like that go from who they are to what they are is absolutely epic. And I loved everything about the sequence. I don't think I'm going to get over it for quite some time. What I think really would have been a nice point before, because obviously after this, they go and, we'll get touch on it again in a moment, but they went and obviously saw what happened in the aftermath of that. But I thought what would have been a really cool moment there is when they panned out and they show that, the branches have been formed into Idrisil, is if we'd have got maybe a minute or two of the Council of Kangs. Because we see at the end of Ant-Man Quantumania, they're looking out on their own bits of the multiverse, and they're saying, these guys are starting to touch on it now, and it's going to be trouble and whatever. I thought it would have been cool if it just panned out and we'd have seen the Council of Kangs looking out across the multiverse and just seen in the distance Idrisil, and they'd have been like, shit, we need to do something now. That could have been a big setup for Kang Dynasty, I think, moving forward. I think they maybe, again, it wouldn't have been quite in with the tone of what was happening, but I think it would have amped it up a little bit more just to have that and gone the Council of Kangs knowing that shit was going down on that side of the multiverse, and that they're going to need to be stepping in and doing a bit more now, which I think would have led to more appearances from Kang variants in the upcoming films and different bits that we're going to see. So, but then we do get to see the aftermath of what's going on after this. And the TVA seems to be a nice, comfortable place now. Obviously, Casey and OB are obviously working on things. They seem to have turned Miss Minutes back into a general AI rather than a lust-filled murder bot. Which by far and away the creepiest thing of this entire episode was obviously that bit with Miss Minutes a couple of episodes ago. Hands
down, for sure. It was that was frightening stuff to see out of her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've seen anything this Halloween that was more frightening than that, to be fair. So, but then obviously we get that Mobius is going to be leaving. He wants to leave the TVA, and he wants to go and see what his life was going to be like. And we do get that in the fact that he leaves and he sees himself with his two kids on the branch timeline, and he obviously has a quick chat with Sylvie as well. We know it's not going to take long for Mobius to come back into things though, because we know we're getting him in Deadpool. So something's going to draw him back in the collapse of the multiverse again. Whatever happens in Deadpool, it's not going to be long to see him. And basically everyone seems to have got a nice sort of steady, nice happy ending, and like you said, it seems to have wrapped up a story really, really well. And again, we get that kind of visual shot of where it goes back into Idrisil, and it just focuses back in on Loki for that one last shot. He's sat there on his throne looking after this multiverse that he's sort of had a hand in creating. I don't always like nice endings to series, but I think this was done really, really well, and it wasn't done in a cheesy way either. Des, how are you feeling about the end to this episode?
Man, I don't even know if I could say it's completely happy. Because Loki, in episode 5, he tells Sylvie, like, I just want my friends back because I don't know who I am without them. And it's here we are, episode 6. He's on the throne holding time, creating Idrisil alone. And if you look closely, at that last shot of him, he starts to tear up, I think. And I think he's watching the moment where Mobius is watching his kids. I feel like Loki can see all at that point, right, as he's holding these timelines. And I think he's starting to tear up because, again, there's the burden that in order for his friends to have these lives, to even see that whatever lives they have, he has to be alone at the top. And so I thought that was a very impactful moment. But I thought it was a really, really good ending. In fact, Mobius says that thing at the end of the episode where Sylvie's like, "What are you going to do?" He said, "I'm just going to sit here a little bit and let time pass." And I thought that was like, wow, what a line, right? Because he's somebody who has lived outside of time for so long, they don't even know what time passing really is. You know what I mean? They don't get to watch things progress. They don't get to watch plants grow. They don't get to watch, any of these normal basic human things. But Loki has allowed them that moment, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And I think that, again, that's a full circle moment of like, what is the idea of being a god? And it's like, being able to provide other people things that they might not know. You know what I mean? That you provide them. That's kind of, it's kind of a concept of godhood. And in that moment where he said, I'm going to sit here and let time pass, I was like, wow, Loki's kind of allowing him to even have this moment to let time pass. So I absolutely love the ending. I thought it was both beautiful, tragic, happy, not so happy. I thought all of those things were kind of at play here, but overall, man, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a good way to not only send off the character, but to even potentially set up Mobius for Deadpool 3, right? Because even Mobius is like, I want to go see the thing that we've been fighting to protect this entire time. And I was like, yeah. And I think that even gave more purpose to Mobius, because Gloria's purpose, I think, isn't just for Loki here. It's like everybody at the TVA has been fighting so long, living all these years to purge all of these people in these timelines. They don't even know their own purpose. And I think now, after all of this, Mobius is like, man, maybe I do have a different purpose. Maybe there is something new to protect here. And I think that's going to bleed into Deadpool.
Nice. Jordan, your thoughts on the ending of this?
Yeah, I mean, so much. There was the moment, obviously, of Loki at the end there, that final look of him. I looked at that and you see him tear up, and you see a range of emotions, I think, across his face. But I don't think he's happy. I don't think that he's necessarily happy with the decision that he's made. I think that he's happy that his friends have been able to live and to a certain extent, I think, thrive now with the TVA sort of being back on a level playing field, and Mobius being able to make that choice. And the choice that Loki made is kind of reflective of him allowing that freedom of choice for everybody else. It does call back to that previous conversation that he and Sylvie had at the bar in episode 5, where she talks about wanting things and what's wrong with wanting things. And he finally admits that he's doing this really to save his friends and to not be alone. And then you think about the conversation that they had even earlier in this episode, where he says that the last thing that he wants is a throne. That's the furthest thing away from his mind and his desires at this point. And that's exactly where he ends up. But that's just, I think, emblematic of the fact that this is the most selfless choice that he's made in his entire life, which is a really, really powerful thing when you think about where the character has come from over the course of all of these movies, especially knowing that this version is fresh off of the height of his ambition to want a throne, to desire power, to desire a conquering of Earth and of other people. To now arrive at this place is really, really powerful, and I think it is tragic to see him in that position, to know that he has made, one of the greatest sacrifices, that anybody could ever make, more than anybody else, I think, would be capable of making. But because he is a god, because he has that power, he has that stature, that knowledge, and he comes from Asgard, it is about laying your life down for a greater purpose. We've seen Thor do that to varying degrees on a much different level as it relates to Asgard. But if you look at Loki, man, I think I don't know. I think that there's a conversation to be had, like, about the real sacrifices that he made here, which I don't want to compare necessarily and say like one is better or greater than the other. But Thor's has some very selfish moments, as is Loki. But what Loki has done here, it's of a true greater calling and a greater purpose, like one that's not even necessarily comprehensible, on a certain level when you think about it, and I think that that's like a really poetic and beautiful thing that they've done with the character.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you think of a greater sacrifice than giving up your own life to sit on a throne that saves the multiverse and holds time together? I mean, it's
wild.
I can't think of many more bigger sacrifices than that.
Yeah.
Given that, I mean, you guys sort of touched on it a little bit earlier on in terms of, is this the end of where we see Loki in the MCU? I can't personally imagine that we don't see him in some regard in Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars. If this is the dude that holds the multiverse together and he's watching over it all and making sure that it's sort of held together by himself, we can't imagine that he wouldn't be looking to step in at some point and be someone that goes up against all the different Kang variants that are trying to break it all down, or even be the one that sort of like is part of the cause of what happens, assuming they go a similar route to the comics of Secret Wars in terms of pushing everything, all the universes together to create just one single universe at the end of it. I can't imagine that he's not going to be a part of that. Do you guys really think this is the end for Loki, or we're going to see him again in the Avengers films? Surely.
I think like if we actually didn't see him again, I'd be okay with it. Realistically, though, I think that there does have to be something there for the character in one of those Avengers films, Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars. He has so much knowledge about Kang the Conqueror, He Who Remains, all of this stuff. I mean, he has more knowledge about this individual on these variants more than anyone else does. I don't know if he's a part of a fight per se, because he is holding together as many timelines as he can, which I think is also important to note that he's not able to grab every single branch. He grabs like what he's capable of grabbing. I don't know if they necessarily imply that every one is like held together. I feel like there's still some like branches out there that are, sort of in chaos and just, sort of loosely not a part of Idrisil in that respect. And so I think that there has to be some possible interaction that Loki has. Maybe if they visit him, maybe if it's similar to what we saw out of the Red Skull in Infinity War, where they have to go visit him to get a certain piece of knowledge, and he can, from his throne, he can share that knowledge and impart that wisdom on whoever's requesting it. But I don't know if Loki is actively a part of defeating Kang the Conqueror and all of the variants come Avengers, Kang Dynasty, and Secret Wars.
Des, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty on board with Jordan here. I just don't know what capacity that he will show up. I will say, I think where Loki ends up, again, as a god, he's now part of like this mythology, right? And I think somehow, somewhere, people have to know what Loki is doing, right? Like, we know Balder the Great is this thing, Thor is this thing, Odin is this thing. I think eventually Loki's story, somebody has to get the word out there that he's now Idrisil. You know what I mean? Like, he now is holding together all of these timelines. And I think it will come into play later down the line, but I think it will look like in the form of Jordan said, maybe somebody has to visit him for some reason. Again, he is still a god. He probably can still clone himself in some capacity, but he is carrying a burden of time right now, literally in his hands. And I feel like he can't move or do much outside of that. And so, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what it looks like, but I think when it does come to, Secret Wars, incursions, time, all of these things, I think there will have to be some mention of Loki in his new mythology. Oh, how is time being held together right now? Loki has them literally in his hands at the end of time. You know what I mean? Like, and somebody will have to, do something to, again, either go visit him or, I don't know, talk to him, conjure him, communicate with him. I think we'll see him again in that capacity. I'm just not sure, again, like Jordan said, he'll be fighting anything, but I think he will be helping the cause at the end of the day and still be a part of that story in some way.
Nice. One thing I tiny skipped over, which has just popped back into my brain, Renslayer. We see her at the void at the end of time, and it looks like she was being faced down by Eliath. Obviously, we've not seen since the last series. Now, I'm of the opinion that no one dies unless you see it really happen on screen, especially in modern day cinema and TV series. So, are we actually assuming that Renslayer is dead, or is she going to pop up somewhere else again?
I think she pops up. I'm of the same exact mindset. Like, if we don't see it, if it's not a clear indication of death on screen, especially in this universe, they are leaving that thread wide open. If she never comes back, they have an easy way out to say she was killed by Eliath. But if they want to bring her back, then there's obviously a scene and a moment that they can create in which she's able to escape that situation. And I think that there's potentially more to do with her character as it relates to Kang. It's tough though, because when you look at these Avengers movies, though there will be two of them and presumably Kang will be the big villain in both, I mean, there's only room for so much, I mean, unless these movies are going to be 6 hours apiece, like how many different threads, how many stories are they going to carry over? Like, I don't know if it's going to be that many, so this could be the end of Renslayer, not necessarily in the form of death, but just in the form of what her story represents. Maybe we don't see her again, but I think that they left it pretty pretty wide open to sort of figure out like where they want to take that character in the future.
I think that's fair as well in terms of you don't necessarily have to continue this thread or this story with her because,
Mhm.
you know, there's plenty of other interesting characters that are stuck in that void at the end of the time that they could pick back up if they wanted to in terms of all the other Lokis and everything like that. So, you know, if she's just left at the end of the time and she's left to the mercy of Eliath or whatever happens at that time, I think, yeah, that's absolutely fine, isn't it? We don't necessarily need to see a continuation of a story. So, gentlemen, the end of this series, I would like a rating from you guys. And actually, because I said, you know, it effectively is one long series in two parts. So, series 1 and 2 of Loki as a whole, Des, give me a rating out of 10.
Mm, wow. I think at the end of all of this, series 1 and 2 put together, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 9, man. I am. I think, you know, this series, I think they set out and did what they needed to do. I think at the end of season 1, you feel one way, but when you put it all together, when you literally string everything together, this character arc, all the characters together, I'm going to give it a 9, man. I think particularly this season, they were firing almost all cylinders when it came to the way it looked. Again, the sound is crazy. I really love this soundtrack. I think they were really killing this soundtrack. But I think this is a piece of MCU content that it feels complete. And we don't always feel like that. Jordan said something earlier where even when they started this thing, we think they already knew the ending. In a lot of MCU projects, they purposely have to leave open because they don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And I think the definitiveness of this series, the way it ends, feels so different than a lot of the other MCU projects that we've gotten. We've never gotten like again, maybe beyond like an Endgame, Iron Man and Cap story in Endgame, you know, this feels like, I don't know, just something completely different. But I think it's also a TV show that people will cherish for a long period of time. And I'll only take a point away because there's some episodes in there. Season 1, I was like, this is okay, and there's some Sylvie stuff in there. It's like, we kind of left that alone, you know, kind of type thing. But I think overall, man, this is a very exceptional show, and Marvel, I think, should be proud of this.
Jordan, hit us with your rating.
You know, I hate to sound boring and repetitive, but I would give it a 9 as well. I think that it mostly sticks the landing in pretty much every respect. And Andy, what you said earlier at the top of the episode is something that I also feel a lot. Whereas in the medium of television, finales, ending series is largely a disappointing venture. I think for the vast majority of television, you can probably count the amount of satisfying finales on one hand, if we're being truly honest about it, especially in this, you know, sort of newer prestige TV era of the past 20 years where we lean heavily on drama and episodic storytelling. But the fact that this I think feels like a finale to this show, to this story. I don't foresee them doing more. If this is truly it, then they really nailed it. They really did it, and they brought it full circle, and also recontextualized what the series is truly about. I mean, we knew it was always about Loki going into it, but I think after season 1, there was this expectation and this hope of how much Kang and that was going to be of importance and how that was going to signal towards the future. And they certainly still have those threats there, and they still set that up. And I think that there's meaningful progress that they make. But this is really about Loki, and this is really about his journey and his path and his story. And they absolutely, you know, sort of reinforced the reason that this show was created. They had a story that they wanted to tell that they felt like was worth telling. And Tom Hiddleston and everybody involved in this, you know, Michael Waldron from creating it, Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, you know, really leading the charge on directing this second series. They understood, I think, just the importance of what it meant to bring this all full circle for this character, who is such a beloved character for so many people in the MCU. So a strong 9 for me, and definitely of the upper echelon of what we've gotten out of the recent phases, and really just the entire MCU. I think when we go back and watch this as one full experience, it'll be truly memorable.
I think the two of you have said everything that I possibly could say about the love for the series. To be fair, I'm gonna give it a 9.1 or an 8.9 just to be different. It's but no, it really is up there, isn't it? Is top tier Marvel stuff from any phase that they've done so far. I think before Series 2 came out, I did a ranking of like Phase 4 and up to Phase 5 so far, which I think was before Secret Invasion, and I had Loki at number 2 of my Phase 4 and 5 projects of all time. No Way Home, obviously, just beating it out, but I think when you watch this from start to finish, it may even creep slightly up, even higher now. I'd have to write an all-time ratings list for all MCU projects, and I'd be interested to see where I fit Loki into that now, in terms of like absolutely everything that they've ever done. A fantastic series. It's been absolutely immense, and I can't wait to rewatch this episode, to be fair, and just go through that emotion all over again. I normally get a couple of chances to watch it before I jump on and record, so I came out of it pretty raw, and I'm just still pretty thrilled about it. I've got to go and put that aside and watch the Marvels in about an hour's time, and which I'll be reviewing next week, so we'll see how that goes. But gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on and chatting this with me. It's been absolutely amazing. I was so hyped to get you on, and not that you were ever in danger of doing so, but you've not let me down either. Let's put it that way. But literally, tell everyone at home exactly where we can find your podcast and find yourselves online.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Andy, for having us on. This was such a pleasure. But you can find us at Two Black Nerds. We are available on most major podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple. You can find us on social media at Two Black Nerds everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to us on YouTube. We have leaned heavily into the video portion of our podcast lately, so you can find all of our reviews. And we've also been reviewing Loki each and every week, and we will be doing so as well very shortly here, so you can watch or listen to all of those Loki interviews, and definitely be on the lookout for our Marvels review as well. That'll be coming out at some point next week. So definitely stay tuned to Two Black Nerds and everything we got coming out.
Amazing. Definitely go give them a follow, give them a like and a watch on YouTube as well. You'll find this episode out very, very shortly, where again you can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, and again on YouTube as well. Go give it a watch, tune into these guys and see their chat about it as well, because I'm sure they're saving some of the best stuff they wanted to talk about for their own episode, and it's going to be worth listening to as well. So, gentlemen, thank you very, very much. As I said, I'll be back next week with a Marvels review. And until then, all of you, take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Galactic Core Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. But until next time, go get your geek on.